Hello and welcome to the Uniform Guidance webinar. My name is Nasrin Koshan and I am Financial Compliance Manager. I'm giving a presentation with Beth Kroger, the Chief of Operations with GILA, and Beth Kingsley, a Grant Officer with OCG. Our today's topic is how we get prepared for the uniform guidance and provide you a brief overview of what working group has developed around the uniform guidance. Let's get started with the key dates. There are key dates that we need to keep our mind and we need to consider it. December 26, 2013, the rules were issued, and the December 26, 2014, the uniform guidance is effective. So these 2 days are the most important days. Administrative requirements and cost principle will apply to the new award on or after December 26, 2014. Audit requirements will apply to audits a whole fiscal year on or after December 26, 2014. But why the changes? So that's the one. The main reason is to reduce the risk of fraud, waste, and abuse. To streamline administrative requirement, cost principle, and audit requirements for federal award. To set up requirements for financial management of federal award across entire federal government. And also to simplify and harmonize inconsistent and overlapping requirements of federal awards, to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of federal awards. And the key here is to be in compliance with new standards and requirements to have effective internal control in place. This is a few steps that we need to follow, make sure that we have a strong internal control. Take immediate action when non-compliance are identified. Comply with federal statutes, regulation, terms, and conditions on federal award. Establish and maintain a strong, effective control with providing policy and procedure and following that policy and procedures as well. To monitor compliance with federal statute, regulation, and terms and conditions. Take reasonable measures to safeguard protected, personally identifiable information and other information federal agency designate as a sensitive. And to have clear roles and responsibilities in our organization. So where is located? The uniform guidance is located in Title 2 of the Code of Federal Regulations. And this is how it's organized to 6 sections, started with definition, goes to pre-award and post-award, and finally go to the audit section. But as I mentioned, effective December 26, 2014, there will be no longer A21, A133, A87, and A89, and A110. So they will be all consolidated to the uniform guidance. So the uniform guidance will combine and replace to 8 different circulars. So I'm turning this to Beth.
Hi, I'm Beth Kingsley. I'm a grant officer here in OCG, and I'll be taking you through the next few pieces here of our presentation. So one of the great things that most institutions have discovered is a lot isn't changing from the old circulars to the new. So in a number of ways, it'll be business as usual for us, but there are a number of different things that popped up that we'll be going through today. But when the announcement for this uniform guidance came out, research administration leadership met to discuss how they wanted to plan this out. They really wanted a collaborative effort. So they pulled in someone from OCG, Nazrin from SPA, and Beth Kruger from one of the departments. And it was our job to put together a more detailed strategy of how we wanted to address the uniform guidance and to ensure that it was a very cross-departmental effort involving all of the central offices as appropriate and also the rest of campus too, so that everyone was involved in this project. And we put together a 5-stage approach. Right now we're in stage 4, broad dissemination. We're coming up quickly to implementation. That is, as Nazrin mentioned, December 26th. And implementation, we expect, will take a number of months after that, not just because of the need for training, but because most agencies haven't put together their own implementation of this yet. NSF is the only one that's come out with the draft, but NIH is supposed to be coming out soon. So we're looking forward to that. We identified 8 different hot topics we felt our institution should address and created working groups around those. So we actually put out a call to all of campus asking for people to be involved. Some, and dozens of people stepped up and really helped out. Some were even on more than one working group, and we'd like to give a quick thank you to everyone who's involved. There's a lot of time and effort. We realized that, and the work you did has been instrumental in how our institution addresses this. Once those reports came in from the different working groups, and they actually did an analysis of what the old circular said, what the new uniform guidance says, our current CU policies and procedures, and made recommendations for alterations. They submitted the reports to the steering committee, and the steering committee created executive summaries. And those we hope to have up on our webpage soon. OCG has a uniform guidance webpage. Please go there. There's a lot of wonderful information. There are links to all sorts of different documents and web pages for COFAR and OMB and crosswalks, and we'll continue to update it as more information comes in. And also, all recommended policies and procedure changes have been forwarded to the appropriate parties. Those are being prioritized and addressed as resources allow. And training, of course, will be forthcoming, and we'll keep you all updated on that. Please feel free to check in with us and also on the webpage if you have any questions. So as you can see, a lot of work has already been done by our institution on this, which is great. There's still a lot to be done because not only do we have the uniform guidance coming in, but also InfoEd is set to be implemented at around the same time. I believe that date now is end of January 2015. And on top of that, we have the new PeopleSoft upgrades coming in, which will affect both the financial system and the HR management system. So a couple different things going on there. And we'd still love for people to be involved. If you have any interest in being part of an advisory group or have suggestions for ways to improve our policies and procedures, please contact any of us on the steering committee. We'll get you plugged in or at least get you in the right direction.
Hi, I'm Beth Kruger, GILA Chief of Operations, and I'll start working us through the information that the working groups gleaned. And the first topic is conflict of interest. And in conflict of interest, there's a couple of things. First, it appears that there's increased scrutiny and attention being focused on employees who are doing business with companies with whom they have some type of relationship. So we'll need to keep watch on that. And the Office of Efficiency and Policy has just put out a notice that they will be reviewing and revising the conflict of interest policy, APS 5012, for July of 2015. So that is great timing, and we will need to make sure UG plugs into that. Also, the conflict of interest disclosure requirements also seem to be tightened up, and so we'll need to ensure that we include those additional restrictions and requirements in our policy. The next uniform guidance working group was procurement, And procurement was one of the things in the uniform guidance that the federal government gave us the option to delay for a year. So CU took that option, and procurement will not come into effect here at CU Boulder until July 1, 2016. So we have plenty of time to explore what the changes are and to make sure that our systems are ready to go for that. So a couple of notes on procurement. First is that the uniform guidance is basically silent in regard to what kind of documentation is needed for procurement. And so the working group thought that it would be helpful to have some kind of internal guidance for CU so we knew what was appropriate and what was not. Another thing in procurement that is different is that computers are now supplies as opposed to computers. And what that means is that we'll have to do some work on the impact of that. How is the computer used up? How do we know how much is left over of a computer at the end of a project? So there are some things there that we're going to have to take into account and discuss, but we have the time to do that, which is terrific. Another thing that's new on procurement is something called a micro purchase. And a micro purchase is a purchase that's under $3,000. And a micro purchase can be just bought. You don't have to have quotes or cost price analysis or anything. You can just go buy something under $3,000. It's important to note, though, that our procurement cards are $5,000 limits. So we will need to deal with that. And I think there's a way to do that that's not hard at all. Also, with the micro purchase, we need to make sure that across the institution we have procedures and policies in place that work with these new procurement rules as opposed to saying $5,000. And so for sponsored projects, irregardless of CU's policy, we have to comply with the micro purchase amount. So speaking of sole source, there are also some new regulations from uniform guidance on sole source. And there are now 4 specific call-outs for sole source. It's more restrictive than it used to be, and so we need to make sure that we follow these 4 sole source, and that's really it. And finally, with procurement, we have the bear claw. We all will get very familiar with this, but the bear claw is an important tool because it very clearly and succinctly spells out how procurement will work under the new uniform guidance. You have your micro purchases, which is your first one here, and we've talked about that. And then you have small purchases, and small purchases used to be up to $100,000, but now they're up to $150,000, which is great. But they do require quotes, but they don't tell you how many quotes you need or in what form the quotes should be. So you can have verbal quotes, quotes from the internet, quotes from a catalog, all of those kinds of things. And so there's a little more freedom there in the uniform guidance. And of course, CU has to decide how it's going to implement it. And then it goes on to bids, competitive proposals, and sole source. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to the other Beth.
A lot of the things we've discussed so far have seemed very award management and financial management related. But one of the things that we found was that it tends to flow back to pre-award even when it comes to some of those procurement things. So it especially applies to cost principles. And the nice thing about cost principles is that the basics haven't changed. They still need to be allowable, allocable, reasonable, and consistent, also known as tenable, permissible, capable of being distributed, and conducted as per usual. Some of the most notable changes for cost principles, computing supplies, we do not have to state that they are solely dedicated to the performance of a federal award. It's nice, gives us a little flexibility. But it does put extra emphasis on all anticipated costs being included in the proposed budget and the proposed budget justification. It really helps. We consider as an institution, when we include all that and it's justified appropriately, and the proposal is awarded, we consider that to fall under prior written approval. But if it's not in there, then we run into the question of whether or not we have to go back for prior written approval on a number of things. Entertainment costs were specifically disallowed in A21. They are still allowed. Well, they are allowed now, but it's the same basic principle. They have to be necessary to the project and still fall under the allowable, allocable, reasonable, consistent. And finally, participant support. It was never addressed in any of the previous circulars. It was used primarily by NSF, a couple other federal agencies here and there. But the uniform guidance has defined participant support using NSF's definition and has actually included a lot of restrictions around it, including the fact that participant support is now excluded from F&A across the board. That wasn't always the case. And any agency can now take advantage of using participant support just with prior written approval. And any costs that are awarded for participant support require prior written approval before moving them to another part of the project. So a couple things that we need to address for cost principles. Of course, the direct cost policy. I understand there's a group working on that right now, so they'll be incorporating these new uniform guidance items, and hopefully we'll be able to get that out to everyone soon. It'll affect a number of different ways of how we do business, including but not limited to the CAS form. We'll keep you all updated as we find out more, and of course, please always check back on our website for updates. And just to reiterate prior written approval, please include any anticipated costs in your proposals. It'll just make life a lot easier throughout the project and even at closeout. Subrecipient monitoring is something that's getting a lot of attention with the new uniform guidance. It's a lot more restrictive, especially when it comes to risk assessment. A couple other changes. There's the potential for a 10% de minimis rate. There are a number of different institutions that we can sub out to that don't have a federally negotiated rate, so typically they would try to negotiate one with us. Now they have the option of a 10% flat rate. The other thing that's getting a lot of attention is closeout, getting that done within 90 days, and Nazrin will talk about that a little bit later. But that affects our subrecipient monitoring because we need to ensure that all of our subs have everything into us so that we can meet the 90-day deadline. So we'll be updating our forms and processes. Again, we'll keep you updated on that as that comes out, and making sure that our subs closeout time frame is shorter so that we can hit our 90-day mark. Property. One of the things that we found about property is that it isn't really changing, but there are different emphases that we want to address. So the concept of conditional vesting in the institution, it's not new, it's new language. The word conditional wasn't there before. But what we're waiting to see is how different agencies might implement this. Some, such as NASA, work with a lot of different property and equipment, and they may be interested in taking some of that back, maybe really taking advantage of this. So we'll wait and see how they want to take advantage of it. Prior written approval to purchase property, again, is not new. It goes back to try to always have that in your proposal, but it'll be under a lot more scrutiny. And supplies, if we have $5,000 or more remaining in supplies at the end of the project, we have to reimburse the federal agency. Again, this isn't new, but with computing devices now being considered supplies, it gets us to that $5,000 mark a lot faster. So we'll need to keep a really close eye on this as time goes on. And now I'll turn it over to Nazrin.
So, at first, I'd like to say thank you to my working groups for their time, energy, effort, and input that they had in this important process. So I start with effort reporting. And you know, effort reporting, there is not a lot of change. The same basic concept, still providing supporting document to reflect all activities and also to capture federal activities and non-federal activities. But what working group have for us is to reprogram effort reporting system to capture all university paid activities. but please don't expect many changes for our current EPER system, since there is a risk associated with it, and we are waiting to get more guidance and further guidance from that might be applied to that area. So the working group come to conclusion that we need to revise our policy and procedure. For example, we need to develop a policy around a stipend. Since EPERS doesn't capture a stipend, we need to have a practice around it. We need to have definition about IBS, institutional based salary. And we need to have policy around how we want to handle leave of absence or sabbatical. So how about to have incidental work, how we want to define and have a procedure around that. This is the recommendation that working group have, and I think we need James Lay and Denita needs to pay attention to what they come up with. But there is more emphasis on a strong internal control right now for effort reporting area. The next is cost sharing. The good news for cost sharing, volunteer and committed cost sharing is not expected in research proposal, where otherwise it is required or is in the notice of funding opportunity. Mandatory cost sharing must be in organized based research to calculate F&A rate. And the main change is depreciation on cost sharing on construction or donation to the university is not allowed. And this is the main change. Working group for cost sharing asked to just update cost sharing policy to be in compliance with new standards and requirements with uniform guidance. The next group is closeout working group. So the big change here is about federal awarding agency should complete all actions for closeout no later than 1 year after the acceptance and the receipt of all required reports on terms and conditions of federal awards. This is new, and this put us on pressure for we must submit all financial and other reports as required by terms and conditions on federal award no later than 90 days after the end of the period of performance. So I think you should get back.
Did it go back?
Yeah. What closeout working group come up with is to revise CU policy and procedures for the closeout because they have a few concern about it, how we are going to develop a policy around the project has a large deficit. For example, if the fund is promised, a sponsor asks PI to keep spending, but the project ends up with large deficit. Do we have practice around that? Or how about if we have purchase at the end of project, how we are going to handle it, and they come up with a good recommendation that we need to have PI justification and document that. How about how often a SPA needs to send notification to close out or ask for a non-cost extension form. So the other things is how we are going to close. The project has already ended long time ago. What is the practice around that? How about if we want to transfer budget between projects on the same award? And what is our deadline for us. So there is a lot of vague and not clear information in the policy that needs to be covered and to be in compliance with uniform guidance. And the good news is a working group that including SPA, OCG, VCR, and department working to come up with a procedure that is accurate and efficient for closeout. We are going to be in compliant with new standards, and we are going to close out our project in timely fashion. And they are going to have presentations soon in their meeting. So, and the last slide is about certification. This is new the requirement in the uniform guidance for certifying financial report, invoices, and effort reporting. And there is going to be penalty for false statement. So I'm turning this to Beth. That's okay.
So the next steps we have are clearly training, which this is a beginning of that, and we'll keep going with that. And we're very interested in what kind of training opportunities you'd like to see here and if you'd like to be involved. So please let us know. We also need to keep moving forward with the policy review and development and continue to encourage dialogue between OCG SPA, departments and institutes, and others who are involved in policy making. And of course, implementation. And that's going to take a long time because, as we've said before, most of the agencies haven't even responded to the uniform guidance. And so until we hear from them, you know, it's difficult to implement. So we're on our way. We understand the ramifications of the uniform guidance. We're working through how we're going to implement that here. And so now all we have to do is keep calm and ask questions. So I have a couple of the frequently asked questions here, and I do want to draw your attention to the source for this. It's the OMB frequently asked questions document, and it is very readable, it's very helpful, and we're getting it put up on the OCG website for uniform guidance, and I really encourage you to take a look at this. The first frequently asked question is related to often a scientist will say, I need to go with this vendor for scientific reasons. Is that valid for sole source, and is it valid at every dollar amount? And the answer is yes, it is valid as a sole source justification, and it's for any dollar amount. So that's very, very helpful. And I forgot to mention that the OMB frequently asked questions document, it does have the weight and strength of the uniform guidance. So it's not just suggestions or language that they won't stand behind. This is vetted language that can be used as justification for what we do. The next frequently asked question has to do with conditional title. And what does that mean? And basically what OMB says is there's really no change. It's always been there. We've used some different words, but it's always been there. So that's reassuring as well. The next frequently asked question has to do with conflict of interest. And what does that actually relate to? Is it scientific conflicts of interest or financial conflicts of interest? Very different things. And luckily for us, it's financial conflicts of interest, which is much easier and clear to deal with. And so that's helpful to have that clarified. And the last question is, when is this effective? And it is effective for all new awards made after December 26, 2014, but it could also be effective for funding mods and supplemental funding if the agency that's issuing the funding mod is taking that as an opportunity to revise the terms and conditions. So basically it's the old sponsored research answer of it depends. And so we'll need to, as we're getting in funding mods, need to be clear on what rules they're under and if the agency is taking the opportunity to change the terms and conditions or not. So those were all of the frequently asked questions that we had prepared. Are there any questions in the room from the vast audience here today? Okay, well, I guess there aren't any, which means that we apparently did a very good job in presenting information. So thank you all for listening, and if there's anything else, please don't hesitate to contact anyone on the steering committee. Thank you.